Come in. Come. Come into the embrace of the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Grand Traverse in this service where we focus on the need for a new attitude, an attitude of seeing the earth as a component of democracy. I'm Margaret Wozniak, and I'm assisting Misty Sheehan, who is coordinating today's service. In her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, Robin Kimmerer, a Potawatomi author, relates the idea that her tribe teaches, the idea of one bowl and one spoon. It holds that the gifts of the earth are all in one bowl, all to be shared from a single spoon. This is the vision of the economy of the commons, wherein resources fundamental to our well-being, like water and land and forests, are commonly held rather than commoditized. Properly managed, the commons approach maintains abundance, not scarcity. The earth exists not as private property, but as a commons to be tended with respect and reciprocity for the benefit of everyone. These are some of the ideas that we will explore in today's service. Do we have any visitors today, or anyone who has not been here in some time? No? Well, welcome to all, whether you are in the sanctuary or joining us online. It is our tradition that our joys and sorrows are shared a bit later in the service, so I remind you that you may write a joy or sorrow in the book over on the left wall, and you may light a candle for your intention at any time during the service. If your joy or sorrow is too tender to share, simply hold it in your heart. I remind you to please silence your electronic devices so that our service will not be interrupted. And we will now enjoy our prelude, Now Thank We All Our God, performed by Barbara Young.
was wonderful, Barbara. I'd like to welcome everybody here. I hope you had a wonderful Thanksgiving with friends and family and everything like that. Okay, we gather here today to celebrate blazing trails into a future for all. We light this flame to all who have paved the way, those who have set goals for education, racial justice, the vote, control over our own bodies. We light this flame for our descendants, our children, and those who we influence, and those who will follow them. May they have a smoother path, a life where there is peace, equity, and love. Margaret will now ring the bowl. We ring the bowl for us, for our generation. May we have the strength and courage, the self-esteem, self-acceptance, self-reliance, self-love, self-honesty, and self-confidence to continue challenging injustice. As the sound reaches out over the congregation, may our actions reach out over the world. I have a couple of announcements. First of all, if you've looked into the social hall, there's half off everything there. So go in the store, yeah. So go wild, okay? Also, the Green Sanctuary Committee has asked me to make you aware that we have this basket for used batteries. And it's in the little room across from the social hall. Yeah, and so please bring your batteries there. Okay, our opening song will be 10:10, We Give Thanks, led by Renee.
Please rise as you're able in body and spirit and join me in singing We Give Thanks. We'll sing it twice through.
Again, in Braiding Sweetgrass, Robin Kimmerer relates this story, which I find relates to the offering. As a child, her family spent the summer camping in the Adirondacks, and every day began this way. She woke to the smell of boiling coffee prepared by her father. When she smelled it, she and her siblings knew that it was time to get up, for the first ritual of the day was about to begin. Her father took that steaming pot of coffee and poured the first cup onto the ground, saying, "Here's to the God of Tahawas." Tahawas is the Algonquin name for Mount Marcy, the highest peak in the Adirondacks. Only after her father had made an offering to the earth did he pour the cups of coffee for himself and his wife. The first action of the day was to acknowledge the mountain with an offering. Today, we can make an offering by sending a check to the church, by going to our website, or by going to the Vanco phone app. We now make our offering to our portion of the earth, which is our congregation and our wider community. The offering will now be collected with joy. Be assured that it will be spent with thoughtfulness and prayerfulness. As it is gathered, we enjoy "We Gather Together," performed by Barbara Young.
Now, it is time for our joys and concerns. My first one is a concern. It's a wish for member Mary Lee Orr, who has passed on. Mary Lee was one of my dearest friends. She loved canoeing and put together the canoe trip for the Green Sanctuary, which unfortunately had to be canceled because of bad weather. But anyway, I think that we should do a Mary Lee Orr memorial canoe trip if anyone is interested. Okay. The next one is holding in the light those who are dealing with sorrow in this holiday season. The next one is from Mary Van Balen. A joyful thank you to all who helped, supported, and donated to the fundraiser last night. We continue to offer service and then finish up. You are all so appreciated. And the last one is for my sister Vivian and her husband, who is now in full-time care. So we will also think about people who have joys that they haven't shared and sorrow that is deep in their heart. And we hope everyone will feel better.
You may have already read this reading. It's in the current issue of UU World, but I think it bears repeating. It's called Earth, You Are My Body by Reverend Sandra Fees. O Earth, for your lush body, broken, for your living waters, sullied, for your sheltering trees, scorched, for your wild creatures, pursued. For you in my distress I call out. I long for the breath of the wind and the dance of the sea to move what seems immovable, to break us free from this silence that hangs in the air. Aching for a song to repair, to liberate this land, I call out. You, Earth, are my body. This planet, a sanctuary. This land, a garden. In my distress, who will listen? Who will refuse to be silent? Who will lament with me? Who will lift their voices in sacred song and call out with me in distress to heal your earthly paradise?
You might be asking, what is Earth democracy? The ideas in Earth democracy come from an Indian writer, Vandana Shiva, who professes that we live in a continuum between the human and the non-human species, between the present, the past, and the future. She has garnered her ideas first from indigenous peoples around the world who see Earth as their mother, and as such, it needs to be protected for future generations. She gets her ideas, second, from women. Women are ignored by corporate and government thinkers. Third, she gets her ideas from the poor who are dispossessed in economic decision-making. These three populations, indigenous peoples, women, and the poor, she says, use ideals that should become national economic ideals. And this is the book that she wrote, and I'll give it to the library, so any of you want to know more about this, you can check it out. Okay. We have to begin 500 years ago. She begins with the enclosure of the commons that occurred in England. Way back in 1516, during the feudal system, peasants worked for their lord, but had some land to grow their own crops and were given permission to hunt in the forests and fish in the rivers, like Robin Hood. Thomas More complained that the nobility and abbots were enclosing open land, previously available to all living in the vicinity, so the nobility could raise sheep and collect the profits from the wool. Eventually, these enclosures, which took the people off the land, led to the development of the clothing mills in London, where the now landless poor work their fingers off, basically. When British religious nonconformists came to America, they treated it like the noble estates. It's all open land, and it's available to everybody for the taking. regardless of the indigenous people living and hunting and taking care of the land for the next 7 generations. Next, in 1600, the East India Company was formed by people in Britain. It eventually became the largest corporation in the world. It began in small ports in India. However, they quickly assumed control of India from the weakened Mughal empire, which eventually ruled most of India. India at that time had a classic feudal system run by noble families with other families working for them and giving a certain amount of their agricultural products to the nobles. If droughts or floods occurred, both the noble family and the workers suffered because of it, and less taxes were demanded by the nobles. But when the East India Company took over, nobles had to pay a tax to the East India Company. And no longer did the reciprocity between the noble and continue between the nobles and the workers. That tax had to be paid, regardless of extreme poverty or starvation. Well, then, pundits in the East India Company looked towards China to extend their profits. India liked goods traded from China, tea and silk, but China wasn't interested in any goods from England until England suggested opium. The East India Company took over land in Bengal, the eastern part of India, taught the farmers to grow opium, processed it, sent it on ships to China. Well, the Chinese government did not appreciate egregious amounts of opium coming into the country. In fact, the Emperor of China sent a letter to England asking why didn't England take the opium for themselves. China made the shipment and selling of opium illegal, which was their right, and the government burned much of it in 1839. But British warships supported the East India Company, fought with their superior weapons, and beat the Chinese protectors. Opium was again allowed to be transported from China to China from India. At that point, the sun didn't set on the British Empire. You have Britain, North America, China, India, and Africa, all under the East India Company. Other European countries followed the lead of the East India Company. The rush was on. Africa was divided in favor of Belgian, British, German, and Dutch protectorates. The author, Doris Lessing, chronicles her own experience in her Children of Violence series, and Karen Blixen chronicles hers in the book and film Out of Africa. The people in these lands now worked for the the European settlers, and many were sent as slaves to work the plantations in the New World, in the US, the Caribbean, Brazil, and the Spanish colonies. Well, this was very nice for the European countries. And may I insert here that India and China never expanded their influence in the same manner. They both had traditional borders that had been there for centuries. Merchants went to other countries to bring spices and other condiments from those countries, but they never attempted to rule over them. The East India Company no longer exists, but today multinational corporations that roam the world are influenced by the East India Company mindset, selling to other countries and taking resources from those countries to fuel weapons for war, more up-to-date machines, and luxuries that the first world countries enjoy. So, what does Vandana Shiva want to have happen today? How does Earth democracy work? Vandana Shiva feels that multinational corporations in the model of the East India Company are generated to create profits, regardless of their negativity to countries, people, and the environment. First of all, she accepts the idea of a democracy. It's a country ruled by the demos, which is the villagers of the people. She critiques. In a democracy, it is the aspiration and will of ordinary people that should guide economic policy. When economic policy is designed by the WTO, the World Trade Organization, or the World Bank, or the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, and is insulated from being influenced by people, we no longer have economic democracy, but economic dictatorship. Because corporate globalization today erodes equality, justice, and democracy, it fuels a culture of fear. And religious fundamentalism is fueled by fear. Today in the US, in Italy, the Scandinavian countries, and India. It affects indigenous people, women, and poor people much more in other countries than here. Corporations move people from the land their family has lived on for generations. When I was in Peru with my Spanish professor, we visited Colca Canyon. Colca Canyon is up in the Andes, and it's very, very deep. It's deeper than the Grand Canyon. So we went there with a guide to see the condors flying over the space, and it was just beautiful. Colca Canyon, I looked on, and I looked to the other side of the canyon, and I saw that there were several villages at various heights. I asked the guide, well, how do those people in those villages get food and medical care? They have to go all the way down to the bottom and come back up? The guide explained, they don't. It's too difficult to get from there to here. So they were living as they had lived for generations. In Central America and Africa, corporations take land from indigenous peoples, turning it into plantations for, again, the first group of people, plantations of bananas and pineapple and chocolate and coffee. Corporate greed leaves poor people living more poorly. I'm sure those of you who have traveled have seen the poverty in third world countries. When I was in India, I visited a 5-star hotel and I was standing there looking out of a wall of plate glass, and down below me was a swimming pool, and everybody was laying in the sun at the swimming pool, getting suntan, and there was a wall about 15 feet high on the other side of the swimming pool. There were people living on the other side of that wall that I could see, and they were living in houses that were made of 2x4s and plastic put over the 2x4s, and they were right next to each other with no place for toilets except in the paths between the homes. Vandana Shiva continues, but global can be understood differently. It can refer to our universal values, and that's what our church celebrates. Human experience in our life, embodied in diverse faiths, enshrined in the UN Declaration of Human Rights. We can experience the global as belonging to the entire Earth family, people, animals, and plants, not corporations. As members of the Earth family, our consciousness compels us to respect and protect the sovereignty, integrity, and ecological spaces of other species. This, in turn, creates the imperative to reduce our ecological footprint on the Earth's resources. By prioritizing people and respect for nature above commerce and profits, ecology and equity above trade, citizens above corporations, local democracy above the global market, and people's lived realities in their everyday life above the abstract constructions of corporate capitalism, resources are conserved, livelihoods are protected, justice and sustainability can be ensured. Today, multinational corporations even affect our life here in the United States and even here in Michigan. Line 5, owned by Enbridge, a Canadian company out of Calgary, now goes under the Mackinac Bridge, despite the knowledge that a leak from that 60-year-old structure would affect 2 of the 5 Great Lakes significantly and destroy fishing in both lakes. In Michigan, the Nestle Corporation placed a plant in Mecosta in the middle of Michigan in order to draw pure, fresh groundwater to sell for $1 a bottle to everyone. North Dakota now has 20,000 gas wells, which are projected to last for only 20 years, using groundwater in their production of oil and creating waste that will lie around for how long, we don't know. In former President Al Gore's television appearance, he showed a film of the president of the World Bank who refused to talk about global warming. The man sat there, silent, uncomfortable, in front of the interviewer, but refused to discuss global warming. She feels it is essential to dispel the illusion that corporate globalization is inevitable. Globalization is a political project and it needs a political response. Our political response needs to put human beings and nature in all of our diversity at the center of economic thought. We must stop treating corporations, markets, and capital as people for whose protection all human beings can be placed at risk. She demands a new world view in which compassion, not greed, is globalized. Indigenous people, women, and local people can make a difference if they work together. Indigenous cultures of the Amazon, the Andes, and the Himalayas are examples of living cultures that have been sustainable over millennia, where not destroyed by the globalized economy, are sustainable today. Indigenous people, women, and local people can make a difference if they work together. When Nestle first established their plant in Mecosta, Michigan, women hiking in the area noticed, hey, the streams have less and less water. The water table was sinking lower and lower from Nestle's use of the water. So they got together and sued Nestle. The result was that Nestle had to cut back on the groundwater they used. But those people in Mecosta then had to pay $1 million for the use of lawyers. And they did it with garage sales, sales of homemade pasties, and the establishment of grants. And some people from our church were involved in this. In India, Coca-Cola established a plant in Kerala, which also lowered the groundwater, and as well let wastewater spread into the rice paddy fields. Local women who had to carry water on their heads to their homes in order to cook started a sit-in at the Coca-Cola plant. The court supported the women and the plant was closed. In India too, women who had to travel farther to get wood for their fires began what was called the Chipko movement, hugging trees corporations wanted to cut down, and they won. Retired ranger Tom Van Zoren noticed that the homestead here collected its wastewater in a sewage lagoon before letting it settle. It was then chlorinated and then traveled underground to a meadow in the Sleeping Bear National Lakeshore, where it was sprayed into the air, still without systems to fully decontaminate the wastewater. I visited the place, which was surrounded by a fence, but you know, most of our wind comes from the west, and the wind blows the sprayed water out of the designated area into an area where hikers can blithely walk through. Not to mention the skunks and raccoons and mice and voles whose fur it was sprayed upon. He and his group of supporters, the Drifters United, have been talking with Eagle, but nothing has come of their efforts. He teaches that trickle irrigation, rather than high-pressure sprays, would be a better solution. After many years of communication between Tom and Eagle, Eagle has continued to support the homestead. However, a new permit is currently due, and Tom has talked with a new person in charge of that permit, and hopefully she will correct the situation. I can ask Vandana Shiva a lot of questions about her theory. We do create our strong lives in our spot in Michigan, but we know that corporations influence democracy here. How can we influence our elected officials? The UN was supposed to be an answer, but it still seems a long distance between the president of the World Bank on the one hand and me on the other hand. Personally, we here in Traverse City are lucky because we have many ways to make decisions based on Earth democracy ideals. When we go to a CSO or a farmer's market, we are eliminating the trucks and trains that bring our food from California and Mexico. We can make our own soup instead of buying Campbell's soups. We have land or pots in which we can grow a lot of our own food. During World War II, people had victory gardens. We can do the same. Also, we can eat what is produced at the time of production. It's fall, time for squash and pumpkins, classic Thanksgiving foods. Spring is for asparagus and peas, which we can buy from local farms. Many of us choose not to shop in stores that treat their employees wrong or act against our political ideals. And at this Thanksgiving time, we can be grateful that we live here, where this is easy, and we, individuals, can make a difference in what we choose to have in our own lives and our responses to political and economic leaders in our country. Earth democracy allows us to remove our blinders, imagine and create other possibilities. She ends her book with the idea, we have just begun to change from 500 years of enclosures to a more democratic, open way of looking at the world. Thank you.
I invite you all to rise as you are able in body and spirit to join me in singing Rising Green, written by the wonderful Carolyn McDade, number 1068.
Sky
Robin Kimmerer gives us these words as we extinguish our chalice. Quote, "Knowing that you love the earth changes you, activates you to defend and protect and celebrate. But when you feel that the earth loves you in return, that feeling transforms the relationship from a one-way street to a sacred bond," unquote. When will the earth be able to love us back?
May the flame of our heritage light our way to the future. May you blaze your own trails to light the path for the next generation. May the flame of our heritage continue to pass from generation to generation. Thank you all.